Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Big Sky. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have Ronald obviously setting up something that, we don't know what he's doing. Obviously, he's terrorizing Eric, which that kid's got major balls. The fact is, he's like, there's like, there's that guy who killed like 93 people or whatever, and even him being like, hey, like you like killing a kid, they don't like that in prison. It's like, this is Montana and stuff like that. It's like, oh wow, like you're gonna get one of many ways you could end up dying in prison is getting shanked. I was like, yo. I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate for a kid that age to know something like that, but I'm like, you never know what kids know these days. But, I mean, to be fair, he's just trying to get inside the dude's head, like, yeah, I'm just trying to scare you so you don't kill me. So it's understandable, but what really surprised me is when you had Cassie show up there and they were face to face. I was like, oh crap. I was like, damn, is it going to be that situation again where like you're so close yet so far away? Because like obviously her and Jenny came across the girls like a couple episodes before they ended up before she ended up rescuing him, because they just it seems. So I was like, oh, she's not gonna realize it. But as she was leaving, luckily she didn't like confront him then, because obviously he had a gun in his hand. He would have shot her. That would have obviously sucked ass. But the fact is that she was walking away, she remembered like, I ran into you, because when she was visiting Merrily earlier in this season, she ran into him as he was leaving. I was like, right. I think me being in front, like, seeing him in a picture is one thing, but running into him first, face to face, even hearing his voice a little bit, it clicked in her head, like it snapped in her memory, like, oh, I ran into this guy before. It's definitely him, So I was like, oh, dude, that's... Because I actually forgotten the fact is they had actually ran into each other. So other things I ended up forgetting in this episode, I had forgotten about that came up in this episode, but we'll get to that soon enough. But, now, obviously, they're just trying to prepare everything, because she's like, I'm not sure, but I feel like this is definitely the guy. They looked through some posts of his mom, and it's like, oh, it's definitely the guy. So they're ready to kind of go in, but sadly, Ronald kind of saw through them. So I was actually kind of surprised, because obviously, like, we see him at one point looking through the window. He's grabbing Eric, handcuffing him and everything. You're like, what's going on here? They get inside the house. The house is booby trapped. And it's like, oh, I guess you wouldn't assume Ronald is as capable as he is, because you would have thought he would just honestly, like, kind of following whatever Rick's lead was. For him to booby trap his house like that, I honestly wouldn't have expected that of Ronald. Even setting up the whole thing at the end where it's like, oh, it turns out the person they found, Jenny thought was Eric. It's like, no, it's his dead mother's body. It was like, oh, that's, ugh. I mean, I get it. It was a panicking situation. You didn't bother checking. Obviously, Cassie got pissed at her. It's like, don't ever do that again. Like, I would have to explain to your son how his mom, like, obviously he already lost Cody. I'm not about to tell him he's lost his mom too. Because I also take that as, that's not just her saying that for their son's sake. I think she's saying it for her own sake too. It's like, I lost Cody, and you're also important to me. You're my friend. Like, I'm not about to lose my partner in my partner in this. I think that, like I said, I think it's mainly for their son, but I think there's a part of it that's also like, no, like, I care about you too, so don't go off doing something crazy like that partner type of situation. So I think Jenny probably appreciates it too, that like, oh, but now it's like, okay, so where's Ronald? It's like, apparently, I guess he took the father, because we saw the car earlier in the episode. And then I was like, where the hell did he get the car from? It didn't even cross my mind to be like, all right, it's the dead priest. It was like, yeah, but it's his car. It didn't even cross my mind to think about that. But also when he like switched and put Eric in the front seat, I'm like, you're on the run. I figured putting him in the front seat would have been even more of a hassle, just because people are more likely to see. Like, it didn't make sense to me. Like, why are we doing that? But it's a long con for him. Once again, a lot smarter than I would have given him credit for. So guess Ronald isn't to be underestimated, because obviously it turns into this chase, because obviously we're looking for this Tesla model, and they end up finding it, but it seems like, okay, we got to make sure Eric's okay, and then they do drive up next to it, because it's like, all right, I'm gonna shoot at Jenny's like, I'm gonna shoot at the tires. Oh, lo and behold, he's not in the front. It's actually the priest. Is that actually an aspect of Tesla models? They will go on autopilot as long as there's like weight on the steering wheel. Is that a thing? That's nuts. Interesting way to apply it, because even was it Sosa was saying like, yeah, like apparently something like this happened in California, similar, like a drunk guy on like, was in his car, and it kind of kept going. As long as, I think, like you said, as long as you have weight on the steering wheel, they had to like get in front of the vehicle, because that way the vehicle's like autopilot will kick in to be like, oh, stop, because something's in front. So luckily everyone was kind of awake. Luckily, I mean, aside from the dad priest and Ronald's mom, like luckily they were able to save Eric, but apparently like he might have jumped off a bridge after sending the car off, so it's like they have no idea where he is. But at the very least, Eric's okay, And I think for Jenny, like, I mean, it's important to save someone out of the situation, considering all the death that's been mixed up in this. Obviously, they were lucky enough to save Jerry, Daniel, and Grace, but obviously there's been other deaths. So it's just like, we're not going to they don't want anyone else to die, especially a kid under the circumstances, especially because, his mom is worried sick, but Jerry's there to kind of confide in her and just tell her, like, it's going to be okay. She's like, I don't think Ronald would kill a kid. Like, yeah, he's not, I'm about to say he's not necessarily the killing type, but he does have 2 bodies now on him. But it's also, like, because I think in his own twisted way, he's almost childlike in his own brain as well. He's kind of messed up, obviously, but I think it's just like, I think things could have turned sideways under the circumstances, but luckily they didn't. So, but even at the end of it all, like, returning Eric to his mom, and she wants to thank Jenny. Jenny's like, no, I'm good. And it's like she's a little awkward about it, but Cassie's like, she doesn't like taking credit for things. It's like, the best ones never do, So I think for her, it's just like we're just doing what we can, They were deputized, so I'm wondering how long that's going to last. Because I once again tell TV, like, hey, I'm ready and willing to give you a badge, but I think for them it's just kind of like, we don't necessarily need that. But I'm assuming maybe that's something we'll kind of see kind of going forward. We'll have to wait and see. But the other side of things that really surprised me was the whole Rick and Marilee thing, because once again we're going back to it where he's just like tapping his fingers, and I was like, is that like a habit he has in the past or something that she like picked up on? They never really showcased that, but maybe it was more so specifically in the rhythm in which he was doing it. It was almost probably like maybe it was on par with like rhythm wise with like one of the songs he sings, and that's what Marilee was picking up on. Really quick, I should point out, Marilee is played by an actress, Brooke Smith. Did not notice until recently, obviously I've been talking about it a little recently, is she played Catherine in The Silence of the Lambs. Had no idea until I was like, holy shit, that's crazy. Like I brought it up recently, I don't think I'd ever seen that movie all the way through until most recently in preparation for watching Clarice. I think that's it. It was just something that was on the back of my mind. I was like, holy shit. I thought it was interesting when I was seeing the movie. I was like, oh yeah, I'm just seeing you now, and I've seen her in other things, but obviously more recent. I'm like, oh, Big Sky, so that was interesting. Regardless, obviously she's in this complicated situation because it's like, she feels like something's off about Rick, like he does potentially remember, because at one point she shows up later on and he wakes up and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, and she's like, who are you apologizing to? He was like, I don't know, and she's like, oh, I think even if he doesn't remember, his conscience is wearing on him because it's Jerry as well as all the other women, and for him he's like, it just got out of control. It's like, we're way past out of control, like you're only feeling. So that, like I said, it meant on some level he was remembering. I think beforehand he didn't remember, but the run-ins with Cassie, Grace, and Jenny, I think, did start triggering his memories. Once again, we don't know. Maybe at what point he fully started potentially remembering, and even if it wasn't fully, at least partially remembering. But obviously, it's like you got to play dumb. Obviously, even the Penelope situation of her being like, at the end of the day, I told you best efforts and stuff like that. So where do you stand? And she's like, I don't get it. She's like, are you with your husband or against us? Because it's like, she's like, Marilee's like, the difference between us is it seems like you're just okay with him, potentially getting locked up at a facility so that he can get better and basically get some form of freedom. That's okay. It sits well with you. For Marilee, it doesn't, And so at home, she's looking around, obviously all this stuff reminded her of Rick. Obviously, like looking back on their marriage and stuff like that. Once again, not seeing him for what he was, but then all those times he's singing, and I think in some moments she's happy, and then she sees looks in his face at one point in time, and I was like, okay, I was wondering where this was going to go. Because I caught a glimpse of the synopsis, and it was like she was going to have to make a decision. I was like, I figured I was hoping, I was like, you're going to end up leaving him, but then I was like, maybe she's going to make the decision to stick it out. I was like, I don't think so. I mean, she's kind of a little unhappy in her marriage anyway, now even more unhappy. But that development wasn't what I thought. It's like, she confronts him, and it's like, oh, Rick, you're, she's like, you used to sing songs, and she used to talk about how morbid of a song some of those were about, like what was it, like a spider eating a fly, and then like a bird eating a spider or something like that, and you're like, where she's kind of going with this, and it's like, for her, she's like, she remembered, it's like, you've killed 2 people, and you were thinking about killing me. I was like, right, that's the other thing I had forgotten. I was like, right, I forgot he walked up in your room while you were asleep and thought about bashing your head in. I was like, how the hell did I forget? That was a couple episodes back, plus the gap in between episodes. But it's just like, right, I forgot about that. And she was aware, because now she was like, now it kind of made sense to her. It's like, oh, you weren't just hanging something up. You were going to kill me because I was, because it's like, it's not just one thing of like, hey, you killed 2 people. Like, no, it's like, you were going to kill me too. Like, I'm up here spending all this time kind of worried about you, like I'm conflicted. It's like, no, you're a monster. Because I think also in her mind it probably showcases like he's willing to kill anyone that gets in his way. So, and then he was like, I don't like your tone. She's like, you don't like my tone? And then she pulls out, like, she had pulled out the hammer and everything. I was like, dude, I was like, wow. And then he was like, it's your menopause again or something like that. And she's like, you put the wrong answer there, Rick, because that means you got your memories back. And proceeded, I was like, wait, is she just thinking about it? It's like, nope, she's doing this. Holy shit. And ended up killing Rick. Everyone comes in. We see at the end she's getting like pulled away by like, I guess I'm wondering, is Penelope going to try and represent her? It's like, nah, I promised you before, best efforts. So maybe she's going to try and help Penelope. Well, Penelope walks away kind of this smile on her face, because it's like she couldn't let Rick go away free. It's like all that he had done. It's like, I think in her own mind, it's like, this is the least I can do. Like, because even Jenny was like, well, at least there's some form of justice. I mean, obviously for Cassie's not the justice she wanted, because she wanted him, like, without him dying, he's getting off too easy. But, I mean, to be being killed by his wife, I mean, I don't know. There's some, I guess, well, it's poetic and irony, because poetic in the sense of, hey, you got yours in the end, but also poetic and irony just because, hey, you were thinking about bashing your wife's head, in full circle she bashes yours in. So that, like I said, it was just a development. I was like, oh shit, I'm curious if we're going to focus on any of that going forward or not. The whole aspect of like maybe Marilee's defense or something like that, probably not, but I'd be curious to see whether they do anything else with that or not. But it's like, at least he kind of got his comeuppance. He got his. I don't think Grace will be too upset about that situation. Like I said, everyone else is kind of like, huh? Because it's like, oh, is it good news or bad news? And even Tub was like, maybe, kind of like, is it good news? It's like, he's like, maybe depending on you. And it's like, yeah, under the circumstances. So that was an interesting development. Obviously, Ronald is still out there. We see him in his big rig, or at least a big rig. I'm assuming it's his. But the question then becomes like, okay, so where are we going to go with this? Like, is he outside of Montana? Is he still in the state? Is he going to try and bail it to Canada? Is he going to try? Well, because the only one who actually had the contacts was Rick. We don't know if Ronald actually met with any of the people like they were doing business with the trafficking. So I don't know whether it's a thing of like he's going to try and meet up with them to get out. Like, it's like, oh, I need you guys to help get me out. Or is he just, I don't know. Because now it's a thing of like they're going to try and track him down. So I guess as long as he's still in the state, they can. Because I guess If he crosses state lines, obviously it becomes like an FBI thing. I think, because initially Jenny had talked about the fact is the FBI didn't want to take this case because like people would rather take it. So, but they kind of might not have any choice to. I mean, it is like a trafficking thing, so it falls under FBI purview anyway. But we'll see whether that like the FBI steps in and has to kind of force to step in at this point in time or not. He's the cornered animal that he is. Obviously, we've seen him make the moves he has. So where do we go from here? Because it also puts Jerry kind of still at. I mean, he has no reason to go after Jerry now because it's like, his information's out there. So I'm curious to see how they handle that. I didn't watch the preview because I don't even want to even know potentially how they handled that. But I'm like, is it just going to be a thing of like, is it just going to be a background thing going forward? Or is everything going to be about going after Ronald? Or will there be like another case? Like, I'm curious, like I said, there's still quite a few. We're still like a little over halfway through the season. So I'm like, where's the rest of this season going to go? I'm very curious to see how it ultimately all ends up playing out, where we go next. Like I said, whether or not it's going to be like a new case and the Ronald thing is going to be in the background, or whether that's 100% going to stay the focus. I'd assume stay the focus, and maybe we just cut back between them trying to find Ronald and him being on the run and just his face, the name plastered everywhere. Well, like I said, we'll ultimately have to wait and see again. Because I was bringing up, like, that is one angle. I mean, I guess that's the nature of things. Like, this trafficking organization, I'd wonder if they'd be able to take them down, but it's like without any real leads to it. I mean, the only person who had any contact with them, probably, like I said, if not Ronald, was Rick. So now that he's dead, no going at it from that angle potentially. So, I guess that's another angle to it too. It's like there is the justice of like, not just for Cody. For Jerry or Danielle or Grace, it's for every person he's ever, kidnapped and trafficked, so kind of justice all around. Once again, Rick kind of got his, but didn't expect things to play out that way, so, like I said, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where everything ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.